Welcome to the Capital News. I am your host, Alex Karitis. Today is February 28th, 2019. Already the last day of February. Can you believe it? We're going to be in the month of March starting tomorrow. So I guess that means spring is around the corner, although, depending on where you are, it might not feel like spring. But we'll see what happens. Thanks so much for joining me today again, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to do some follow-up to some stories yesterday. We are obviously going to follow up on the Trump-Kim summit, the India-Pakistan situation. I have some follow-up comments to the Michael Cohen testimony, and if time permits, I'm going to get into Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Bibi Netanyahu has been indicted for corruption. So let's get started. The first thing I want to talk about is the North Korean summit. So here is an article from Politico. It's not too long, so allow me to read this to you real here quickly. North Korea denies Trump's account of summit collapse. A senior North Korean official contradicted President Donald Trump on Thursday, denying that his country had insisted on the removal of all sanctions in return for dismantling a key nuclear facility. In a rare news conference addressing the reason why nuclear talks broke down in Hanoi early Thursday, North Korea's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ri Yong-ho, added that his country would dismantle the facility if some U.S. sanctions are first lifted. Ri asked the U.S. to lift articles of sanctions that impede the civilian economy and the livelihood of our people, and confirmed that his country would dismantle its Yongbyon nuclear material production facility in the presence of U.S. experts. Trump, during a news conference earlier Thursday, said North Korea wanted the sanctions lifted in their entirety in return for dismantling Yongbyon. Trump said he walked away from his talks with North Korean leader Kim Jong-Un because of this request. They were willing to denuke a large portion of the areas that we wanted, but we couldn't give up all of the sanctions for that, Trump said. Trump noted that Yongbyon is just part of North Korea's nuclear program and that there's plenty left after that. I felt that particularly for that particular facility, while very big, it wasn't enough to do what we were doing, the president added. Without specifically mentioning Trump, Ri claimed that North Korea did not ask for all sanctions to be lifted. What we proposed was not the removal of all sanctions, but a partial removal, Ri said, according to a live translator. If the U.S. removes partial sanctions that hamper the civilian economy and the livelihood of our people in particular, we will permanently and completely dismantle all the nuclear material production facilities at Yongbyon, Ri said. So here we have it, folks. I don't know if we'll ever know the truth out of this summit. The takeaways that I have from this is communication is still ongoing. Things didn't escalate or erupt to anything negative. So in my perspective, I think we're still on the road to peace and prosperity. I hope and pray that's the case. I don't know if this is just something that was lost in translation or if this is damage control, a negotiating tactic. What's going on here? But clearly we are getting two different stories. Our story, our side, the president is saying that they wanted all of the sanctions to be lifted. And the president made the stance that the United States is not going to do that. However, the North Koreans said that's not what we asked for. We said we just wanted some of the sanctions lifted, and that particular facility would be dismantled in front of a U.S. presence. So, like anything in negotiations, I'm not obviously going to call this war, but you've heard me say the comment before. The truth is always the first casualty of war. So here we have a verbal war back and forth, some negotiations between countries who have typically been adversarial to one another. And all I can say is we must continue to hope and pray for peace. I think that the president is absolutely correct when he said there is nothing but potential and a huge amount of potential in North Korea as far as the economy is concerned and even politically speaking. I mean, to bring that part of the world into the global economy, to allow those people to thrive and become of the global community, I think is a good thing for all people, especially those people in that part of the world. South Korea, Japan, China, whole South Asia for that matter. So let's continue to monitor this story. It will continue. There have been no discussions as to whether or not there will be a third summit. I imagine at some point there will be. There may be some talking back and forth in regards to what's really going on here with North Korea saying one thing and the United States saying another. We'll see if we can maybe meet in the middle and get to some other resolution. But, it's unfortunate that we couldn't come to some better agreement, at least what we're told. Who knows? Maybe there's something waiting in the wings. It doesn't seem like that's the case, but I will most definitely stay on top of this because this is important to everybody. It definitely interests me, and I will keep you guys updated. The next thing I want to discuss here real quickly is the India-Pakistan conflict. That seems to be calming down, and thank goodness for that. Again, these are two nations with nuclear arsenals, so we definitely did not want this to escalate any further than what it did. According to the Prime Minister of Pakistan, in a gesture of peace, Pakistan will be releasing the Indian pilot who was shot down earlier this week. So thank God that pilot wasn't killed, because who knows if this would have escalated to something more severe. It probably would have, but he is alive, and hopefully he's in good health, and he will be returned to India, and hopefully that brings the diplomats to the table to resolve this ordeal peacefully, and we can start stepping back from this point, and hopefully there is no further escalation. Again, let's hope and pray for peace. We don't need nuclear nations going to war with each other, especially, well, anywhere, but especially that part of the world where there's so many people. Moving on, I want to follow up with the Michael Cohen testimony, just some other remarks that I think are important to mention, because this goes to the whole fact that this whole thing was choreographed, if you believe Representative Jim Jordan of Ohio, when he said, again, to remind you, that Lanny Davis, who is Michael Cohen's attorney and very close friends with Bill and Hillary Clinton, that the whole testimony and public hearing was all choreographed and orchestrated by Lanny Davis to make another spectacle, to make the president look bad, especially during a time when he was overseas trying to negotiate peace and prosperity. So what was also a little bit too coincidental for my liking had to do with the fact that Mr. Cohen, in his opening remarks and some other comments during his testimony and then in his closing remarks, made the statements that that President Trump, is a racist, a con man, and a cheat. Come on, give me a break here. I mean, I know you have your issues with the man. Don't get me wrong, I understand. But those are the talking points. Those are the talking points from the left. Those are the talking points from the Democrats. Those are the talking points from the mainstream media. Those are the talking points of Hillary Clinton's campaign in 2016. I mean, can it be any more obvious? I mean, he says it at the beginning. He might throw a thing in here or two during his testimony. Then he throws it at the end in his concluding remarks. It's catnip. It's catnip. He knows his audience. He knows that the Democrats are in control of the House. He knows what they want to hear. He knows what the mainstream media wants to hear, and that's what he's doing. Okay, he's given these words to say by his attorney, Lanny Davis, no question. No question. Does Mr. Cohen believe them? He might not. I really don't know. The man's a liar. He's convicted of lying to Congress and for financial corruption, amongst other things. And the man's going to do some time unless there's some other significant investigation taking place in the Southern District of New York that leads to some sort of trial, or maybe that involves the president or some people who are very close to the president. Obviously, we don't know the details of that. Mr. Cohen wasn't going to enlighten us on the details of those investigations, and certainly the Southern District of New York is not going to disclose that information either. So it remains to be seen if Mr. Cohen, in fact, will go to prison. I'm sure he will, because I think he's going here rather shortly. The question is, does he serve his full 3 years, or will he get a reduced sentence due to his cooperation with the Southern District of New York? So this all remains to be seen. This is a three-ring circus, as I said yesterday. This was nothing but an attempt to distract and divert attention from the real situation and from the real crises that we have in this country, whether that's at the southern border, or it's the amount of drugs that come into this country, whether it's the opioid problem that kills tens of thousands of Americans every year, but seemingly that's not a problem or a concern. Whether it's the national debt, I mean, you just go down the list. You go down the list, and of course, if you're a liberal, you have your list of things, and if you're a Republican or conservative, you have your list of things. So add them up. Does this come to the top? If you're on the left and you have Trump derangement syndrome, yeah, you love this stuff. You love this soap opera. You want it to continue. And for all intents and purposes, it is going to continue, and it's going to continue for a good while, as far as the eye can see. We don't know when Bob Mueller's investigation is going to wrap up. Hopefully it's soon. There's still no other information on that. Again, I am anticipating it to come out some point next month. I mean, we were told by acting Attorney General Matt Whitaker at the end of January that it was going to be wrapping up. And then we were told last week that it was going to be coming out this week. And then we were told, no, that's not true. And, I said that was unlikely to happen because you had the Trump-Kim summit. Highly unlikely that that was going to come out during that time period. So we'll see what happens. But I just wanted to state that there is no doubt in my mind that that was just a little too coincidental to be coincidence, that Mr. Cohen is going to come out and say that Mr. Trump is a racist, a con man, and a cheat. I mean, the same words and rhetoric that has been used on this man for the past, really, 4 years. 4 years, if you think about it, because he started his campaign in 2015. It's now 2019. So these words have been used against the man for going on 4 years with no end in sight. And as we know, Elijah Cummings, I'm sure, is going to continue his investigations. Adam Schiff, Maxine Waters, Nancy Pelosi, Jerry Nadler, the whole list of them. You know the names. It's not going to stop. The mainstream media is not going to stop. This is an utter and unhealthy fascination with the president on crimes that he didn't commit, especially not when it has to come with Trump-Russia collusion. That's just nowhere to be seen. Now, in fairness to the truth and justice, if there are issues with Mr. Trump and his charitable foundation, well, that's another story. Nobody is above the law. So if there was some shady practices going on there and that warrants an investigation by the Southern District Attorney of New York, then you know what? Then you got to do what you got to do. I'm not against that. What I am against is these three-ring circuses that come up there from Congress that have no teeth to really do anything after the fact, that just want to make this soap opera go on as long as humanly possible. So we'll see. I think what's going to happen is we're going to next see this Mueller report come out within the next few weeks. That will obviously take up all of the airtime in the mainstream media, probably for at least a week. Everybody will dissect it 20 different ways to Sunday. They'll find nothing. They're already downplaying it because they know they're not going to find any smoking gun on anything on this president, or probably anybody even close in his inner circle. The people who've already been indicted and charged and tried and convicted and all that jazz, that's already done. Is there going to be some loose change here and there? Maybe, but they're going to be on the periphery if I had to make an educated guess. So we'll see what happens. I think that is what is going to transpire. That will be the next thing to come out. Since it's going to be a nothing burger, you will continue to see the Democrats go after the president in those respective House committees. You're then likely to see, don't forget, we still have the Office of Inspector General's report for Michael Horowitz to come out, which that could be bombshell. That's the Inspector General who wanted to refer criminal charges for Andrew McCabe, don't forget. So that is still ongoing. And there could be some serious bombshells in there. And I think there might be some things in there that lead to these fireworks that I'm getting to. And I told you last week that I want to bring up some of that stuff. And I'm going to talk about that probably next podcast. So probably tomorrow. That way we can at least have that discussion, unless there's some other breaking news. But I want to get that out there to you guys. And that involves the Clinton Foundation. So I think there's some stuff that has been underreported and maybe not even reported through the mainstream media that I find rather interesting, and if it proves to be true, will be pretty damning to the Clinton Foundation and their quote-unquote legacy. So I will definitely do that for you guys because I told you I would. Lastly, I do want to read an article from the Times of Israel in regards to the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Bibi Netanyahu, because while we have our three-ring circus, they seem to have their three-ring circus over their politics. It's everywhere. It doesn't matter if you're in the United States, if it's the Brexit situation, if it's the yellow vests in France, if it's Prime Minister Netanyahu getting indicted for corruption. It doesn't matter where you are. Politics is politics. It's nasty everywhere. He's innocent until proven guilty, and we'll see what happens. But let me read some of this article to you. Titled, With Netanyahu Indictment Cast, What Happens Now? Not much, pending a hearing. After 2 years of investigations, police recommendations, legal deliberations, and ad hominem accusations against various senior law enforcement officials, the indictment of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is signed. Getting it sealed and delivered could take years. Attorney General Avichai Mandelblatt's announcement Thursday afternoon that he intends to press charges against Netanyahu in 3 separate cases, 3 times for fraud and breach of trust, and once for bribery, is only the beginning of what promises to be a drawn-out process that is likely to dominate the headlines for years. Vowing not to step down or plead out, Netanyahu is widely expected to try to drag the legal process out for as long as possible. Other senior politicians in similar situations have quit. Former Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, for example, stepped down in 2008, even before the Attorney General announced his intention to indict him. Netanyahu, on the other hand, has vowed to stay on, though with elections on the horizon, his political future may be up in the air. Theoretically, Netanyahu could immediately suspend himself, saying he is taking time off to clear his name and to let the Israeli people go to the polls on April 9th, without having to ponder whether they want to re-elect someone who may go to trial over criminal charges. That's indeed what virtually all opposition parties demanded on Thursday, though his right-wing party backed him entirely. Imagine a situation where the prime minister spends most of his time dealing with his legal troubles. Israel deserves better, Blue and White Party leader Benny Gantz said, for instance. But Netanyahu made clear in a televised speech on Thursday evening that he will not be stepping down. I am telling you, citizens of Israel, this entire house of cards will collapse. He said of the various allegations against him, I am absolutely certain of it. I am 4,000% sure. I intend to serve you and the country for many years to come. And until he's actually convicted, he can seemingly continue to serve as prime minister, provided that his ruling Likud party wins the upcoming Knesset elections and stays in power. A Times of Israel poll published earlier Thursday showed how much of an effect the indictment announcement could have on the election, with Likud sinking and Blue and White ascendant. Cognizant of the damage it could cause, Netanyahu and his party fought tooth and nail until literally the very last moment to keep Mandelblatt's decision sealed until after April 9th. On Thursday, Likud filed for an 11th hour injunction to keep Mandelblatt from publishing his findings, but was rejected by the High Court. The Prime Minister and his allies have argued Mandelblatt's decision would sway the vote and undermine the democratic process. They say he has rushed the process, under pressure from the media and from the left. On the other side, many said, and Mandelblatt apparently agreed, that the electorate should not be kept in the dark about one of the leading prime ministerial candidates being accused of corruption. So the article continues. You can check it out if you want. Again, that's from the Times of Israel. This is interesting because I just want to draw the parallels that Prime Minister Netanyahu is dealing with. At the same time, you have President Trump dealing with it on this side of the pond. So it's back and forth. I am not going to sit here and claim to be an Israeli political analyst because I am not. However, we do know that Israel is an ally of the United States. I don't want to go down that road because I have a lot of questions in regards to why we're always coming to their aid, seemingly no matter what. I don't think we get the full story. We're always told that we have to side with Israel pretty much no matter what the circumstance, and that the Palestinian people they're poor, they're Muslim, they're terrorists, they're fanatical, and, you just cast those aspersions on them. You just say those names, you say those words, and everything gets shut down, and you demonize them, and whatever Israel does is right and just and can never be questioned. Otherwise, you may be called an anti-Semite. So that's a whole other story, but those are serious questions to ask yourself because there's a really rich history in that part of the world, obviously, and we only get really one side of it here in the mainstream media on the U.S. So I suggest you take a deeper look into that. That's not what this podcast is going to be about, talking about those types of things, although it could if the issue comes to a head. But this is important also because I do want to preach peace and prosperity, as I've been saying, in regards to the U.S. and North Korean negotiations, in regards to this escalation of attacks between India and Pakistan. I'm all for peace and prosperity. This is the 21st century. Let's get real, people. Let's get together. Let's solve some problems. We don't have to blow each other up. Netanyahu seems to pride himself as being a strong man. If you ever want to see a deal in the Middle East, a true peace deal, I mean, what's it going to take? I mean, I'm not going to sit here and pretend to know, because this has been one of the toughest deals, one of the toughest riddles to crack. But we do know that Benjamin Netanyahu likes to come off, at least, as a strong man, and sometimes that puts away the Palestinian people and some other Arab nations to come to the table to take him seriously, that he is actually going, in good faith, come to an agreement. So that remains to be seen. Now, the timing of all of this is obviously crucial, as they stated, as both political parties had stated. If you release this type of information, that could sway the political process, but if you don't, that could also sway the political process. It sounds very much akin to what happened in our 2016 election with Jim Comey and the FBI coming out and saying, well, she's guilty of all this stuff, but we're not going to prosecute her. And then he comes out later because he had Anthony Weiner's laptop, and there might have been extra stuff on there. And then a couple days later, no, there wasn't anything on there. So, yeah, she's guilty of that stuff, but we're not going to prosecute her. And, that's the story. That's basically the gist. When you have politicians who are accused of these things, they're obviously innocent until proven guilty, but it does create a political storm. And then you have the electorate who is left up pondering what's going to happen. We like Bibi. We want him to stay. Obviously, that's part of the country, not everybody. But if we do elect him, what's going to happen with this case? Does it get put off because you have to put national interests first, and then you're just going to deal with him after the fact? Or do you continue with the prosecution while he may be prime minister again? I'm not familiar enough with the Constitution and the laws of Israel, but it seems to be a serious question and concern for those people, similarly like it would be here if something does happen with President Trump. So all I'm trying to do is show you guys the parallels of what's happening here and in Israel, and I'm sure I'm not going to be surprised if it happens somewhere else, because it's politics, it's nasty, it's brutal. People will do anything for power and attention. In this case here in the United States, I think, again, a lot of it is projecting. I think the Democrats are guilty of a lot of things that the president, they claim that the president is guilty of. And in fact, we know that to be the case. The question then becomes the degree of their guilt and involvement with Russians and collusion and other dirty tactics. Hopefully that comes out in the Inspector General's report. Maybe it'll come out from the president himself, should he choose to declassify documents. He did say in an interview on Fox News not too long ago, I believe it was with Judge Jeanine Pirro, because she asked him about that in declassification of records, which is something that Devin Nunes of California, who was the former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, who is now the ranking member, that is obviously now overseen by Representative Adam Schiff. He said, will the president declassify these? He was pretty much begging President Trump to declassify documents, because there's two stories. There's two sides to every coin, right? I mean, you have what Devin Nunes said, and then you had Adam Schiff come out and contradict it, but they're seemingly looking at the same exact documents. So we're not getting the whole truth here. The only way that can possibly happen is if Trump, who has the authority to declassify any document he wants, declassifies those documents. And once those are public, well, that's it. Then you're going to know if Devin Nunes is the liar or if Adam Schiff is the liar, because they both can't be telling the truth. So something's up. If the president is holding that as a quote-unquote Trump card, maybe he is. I don't know. I think my speculating, and again, this I always tell you guys, if I'm going to speculate, I'm going to tell you it's speculation. So this is pure speculation. The president is going to wait for the Mueller investigation to wrap up, for that report to come out. The media will have its field day. The Democrats will have their mess with it. and then they'll say it's a nothing burger, and then some of these other investigations are going to continue, and then President Trump might come out and say, boom, here it is. Now what are you going to do? Now how are you going to investigate me when all the things that you've accused me of are not true, and in fact it's your party that has an issue? I think that's what's going to happen. And then we'll have the Inspector General report come out, and then other things are going to transpire. So this could all turn around rather quickly if this proves to be true. So the 3-ring circus is a 6-ring circus, is a 9-ring circus. Maybe we're slipping into the 7th ring of hell. Who the hell knows? But it becomes interesting, doesn't it? So thanks so much for joining me, ladies and gentlemen. Hope to catch you next time. Please like, share, subscribe, get the word out. Leave your comments. I would love to hear from you. This is the Capitol News. I am Alex Karitis. Godspeed.